Hello and welcome to another episode of the Simon and Friends podcast. I'm Simon Short. Joining me this week is Peyton Davila of Two Peas on a Pod. Peyton, welcome back in, man. How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. This playoffs has been interesting, very unexpected, somewhat. I would say weird in a lot of ways, but I think us. I don't want to call us the nerds, but the like wannabe football nerds are still enjoying it, despite maybe where we're at right now with the Final Four teams. But playoff football is good football, so very happy.
I live for is it Bleacher Report that does it? The graphic of the four quarterbacks headed
Yes,
towards whatever stadium it is. I
yeah.
live for that every year because there's always I need I need to pay somebody to make a poster of like them by the decade or something like that.
Like a compilation of just
Yeah,
like
yeah,
in
like a big
order.
collage sort of situation. Yeah, I need that because
It's like
that would be a fun look through history.
it's like I think my dad had this poster growing up, and it was like sometimes I forget what like technically what they were, but I remember my dad had this poster of all the Super Bowl ticket designs with the
Yes,
different Super Bowl
exactly.
logos, and it's
Hmm.
almost like the weirdo version of that, where
The
it's like
the internet
yeah,
era version of that sort of thing.
yeah,
Yeah, remember
yeah.
going to games? No, no, I just want to see the graphic on Twitter about it, and then I'm good to go. Um, is it bad that my first thought, speaking of how weird, I mean, the weirdest thing to happen in the playoffs in years is the Broncos win, and 20 minutes later we get the tweet that Bo Nix broke his ankle and is out for the season. Is it weird? My first thought was like, ooh, if the Broncos win, that's actually really good for my takes.
It, I mean,
I
it's
mean, I
it's
feel for the
effed
guy.
up,
Like that's
but
that's
you
that's
know.
actually probably my first thought, but like 1B was like, holy crap, if Jared Stidham wins, then I'm gonna feel so vindicated.
The immediate that's like the I think that's where the fantasy football brain has bled into like the hot take artist brain, where it's like whenever somebody gets injured, it's like, all right, I have to find out like either like who to trade for, or like
Mhm.
how can I capitalize off of this injury.
Yep.
It's like the like NFL podcasters version of that, where it's like, ooh, how can I talk about this to benefit myself?
I just went from like the AFC being like, I can't have someone from the AFC win because everyone will come for me on the Bo Nick stuff, and like I just can't root for the Patriots to win another Super Bowl. It just can't happen. So,
Right.
but now that number's cut in half. Like now, if three out of the four teams that are left win it, I'm in good shape. So, um, anyways, that's how we're feeling about the playoffs right now. That's our playoff update. Peyton, you're here because it's time for our end of season awards. So you come on every month to do awards. Six times. It's been 2 years. Three times a year, we do everybody's normal MVP, Offensive Player of the Year, all those awards. We do a preseason, midseason check-in, and end of season. So we're here to do that. Now, we're going to go through all your normal awards. This year, we're including Assistant Coach of the Year. I don't think we've had that in the past. Um, but that's been a really well received award the last couple seasons, and obviously there's a lot going on in the coaching world right now, so it's makes sense to bring that up. And then we have some fun ones. You know, we check back in on our most improved player award that we've done the last couple of years, so we have our picks for that for the end of the season. We'll go through our division awards. So just which teams won their division and kind of look back at our predictions for that, as well as do our basic, we'll get you our MVP and defensive player of the year and things such as that. So without further, actually, I do have an ado. Um, Peyton, when you do these, do you find yourself on the scale of my award picks are for myself, and I say be damned the like history and the general consensus discussion of the award, and I make my own selection? Do you feel like you're all the way on the other side where it's like this is more of a predictive exercise for me where I just 100% look at the data, 100% look at the betting markets, 100% look at what other people value for the awards, and I just kind of pick one based on that? Or are you somewhere, some percentage of both, where
Yeah,
you're like,
it's
I know what the history is and I'm gonna stay in that realm, but at the end of the day, I'm gonna make my pick.
I think I was much more, even as soon as like 2 years ago, probably more pilled to the side of being predictive of like trying to align myself with like maybe what's going to happen. But I think
Hmm.
the more that I've just become more, I don't want to say independent thought. football guy, but like more willing to just say, even if I don't align with what actually happens, like I'm okay just saying what I think should happen in Peyton's brain, but also like kind of having a sense of realism and understanding like what the NFL values as, and what an award winner means to the league. I would say that I'm much more like 60% or 65% like what Peyton thinks, and then the other, 40 to 35 is accounting for the NFL side of it and like what realistically does happen with these awards.
Yeah, I feel that. I think this is the first year I've skewed closer to my own picks. Um, so I think I'm like a little bit right behind you there. We're a few years behind our buddy Ben Parker, who is just completely on his island, where he says, "Listen, guys, I've been doing this for a really long time. I know what the value is, and I know the awards that need to happen." So shout out to Ben. Um, Ben went on a crazy rant in Slack today, by the way, on the coaching carousel stuff, man. Oh my gosh, Ben, you're fantastic. Uh, but I think for picking these awards, this was an interesting year because I do think we'll see in our awards. I think there is a lot of chalk, so it's easier to fall into that. Um, but I think for good merit, and I think we both will have some arguments for maybe going against the grain in some capacities, but ultimately probably come to the right answer. Um, and I think one thing that has stuck with me is actually it goes back to the Podfather Bill Simmons, where you want the awards at the end of the year to tell the story of the season, right? So what I tried not to do, because I felt myself wanting to do this for the most this year, is look at like the 5 or 6 teams that it felt like their story was important to tell, and then like assign awards based on that. I had to peel that urge back, but I think there's still a little bit of there where I'm gonna be able to go on Pro Football Reference, and if my or even like I just go look at my old notes in like 20 years when I can't remember my own name, but I'll look in there and I'll see the names of who I thought were the MVP, offensive player, defensive player, coach, all that stuff, and the storylines from the season will play out. So I think I use that as kind of a skeleton, and it I think tends to lean more towards the consensus. But there's a couple times that I think my story felt a little bit different. So let's get right into it. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say to your point, like I think that I do that same thing, but almost like a reverse engineering version of it, where it's I think of who the players are that I would at first really think of as candidates for the award,
Hmm.
and then kind of narrow them down to like my, if it's a 50-50 race. I agree that like the awards in a way should kind of tell the story of the important aspects of the season, and in a way like the teams that were important each season and telling the story of that season should be represented in a way. So it's almost like, not to say that I did this purposely, but like for instance, my offensive player of the year, I kind of had like two very obvious guys in mind
Hmm.
that are the two favorites for this award, and it just kind of came down to like there's other awards that I feel tell the story of one of the teams better than that award, and the player that I ended up choosing is the only player that's on my list that tells the story for that particular team. Which sounds really like podcast brainy because it's like, oh, I want to like talk about all these different teams and spread the
Uh,
love a little bit, but that is kind of how I feel about the way the awards fall. So
Awards are narrative, and I
yeah,
remember that. I mean, I grew up doing this and thinking about this in the world of the NBA, and every year people fight back against like you can't give the MVP for the narrative. And it's like, of course you can. That's the whole point of all
yeah,
of this. Anybody at any point can go back in time and just sort by points per game and see who scored the most points, right? Anybody can go back in time and look at the team with the best record and see who played the most minutes and had the ball the most on the team. And that guy was the best player on the team that had the best record. You could do that. However, sports are about so much more than that. It is about the story. So I and like same thing for this and you know what? We're gonna go out of order. We're gonna go ahead and do offensive player of the year because I think get to those players, and it's Puka Nacua and Jackson Smith and Jigba, and you say, wow, okay, these guys had really good wide receiver seasons. Those teams had really good passing offenses. And then what's the story you can tell off of that based on preseason expectations and supporting casts, and then what those guys could go on to do in the postseason, where, by the way, those guys are about to play in the NFC Championship game. So, like, we have a really good matchup ahead of ourselves. But let's go ahead. Let's start with Offensive Player of the Year and just continue this conversation. Throwing the graphic up. If you're on YouTube, thank you for being here. Thank you for finding the show. Like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. If you're on audio, we're still going to say the names of everybody. You're going to hear everything. But on YouTube, you'll see the graphic that goes along with it. So, again, thank you all for listening and being here. Um, Peyton, we both went with Puka Nacua, wide receiver for the LA Rams, as our Offensive Player of the Year. Tell me why you went with Puka first, and then we'll get into the other candidates later.
As much as I think that people are going to give more credit to Matthew Stafford for what the Rams offense was this year, it is very indicative that Puka was very much the engine that kind of made everything go for the passing game. And I don't want to say not the running game, but because he does his fair share in the
Yep.
blocking
Oh, yeah.
uh, part of the run game. But you look at all the advanced stats, like especially like the yards per route run is the thing that stands out to me. It's
Hmm.
just the fact that he had had significantly less receptions than JSN did and just did more with them anytime he got the ball. And it felt like every time he gets the ball, especially like in gotta have it situations, more than JSN, like there he has an overwhelming physicality to him, eye test wise, that it's just he is going to do whatever he needs to do to win for his team. I know it sounds so basic and like undermining the advanced statistics of his season, but ultimately that's kind of the differentiating factor to me between him and JSN. I don't want to I hate to kind of like ding JSN in this conversation because of the target share part of it. But
Mm.
like when you're the only guy, it kind of makes it easier to get the
Yeah.
kind of season you end up with. Now, don't get me wrong. It's also hard to be the only guy and like you're beating double teams and like you
Right.
are the sole
Hmm.
focus of that passing game. But to me, I felt like the Rams passing game was the primary reason that team was successful as a whole. Whereas I think the Seahawks, we give a lot more credit to the other side of the ball,
Hmm.
and the offense is just kind of like the auxiliary support for that. Which is why, with this being the offensive player of the year, I felt it fitting to give it to Puka over JSN.
Yeah, I'm going with Puka as well. I think if I take Puka and all my like finalists, all my real candidates, who I'll talk about later, and accept all their cases, Puka has the best blend of team success, especially in his main part of the game, right? So the receiving aspect, the passing yardage aspect of the game, the eye test, as you mentioned, stats, and flexibility. I love that he plays all over the formation. He's a big time blocker, and he wins all over the field. I'll talk about that in a little bit. Um, the eye test, man, it's funny because, the eye test is as simple as it sounds because the way those two win, specifically this year, JSN like wins in a way that you don't see when you're just watching the game because he gets open from the wide area of the field and he gets open way downfield. So you just kind of see him catching a wide open touchdown. And you're like, okay, cool. Like I don't. So unless you go back and look at it the other angles, you're not going to necessarily know. Whereas Puka does it in every way, right? Slants across the middle, drags, handoffs, screens. He does all the deep stuff as well. I'll get into that, but he just does it in every way, which makes it feel all that much more important to his team. Um, both Puka and JSN, if you look on next gen stats, Puka outpaced Smith and Jigba by EPA in more ways. They're both 1 and 2 in so many scenarios and flipped in a lot of cases. But Puka is up by a wide margin on the short and intermediate passes, while still being a top 5 wide receiver in EPA per play on deep balls. So he's doing it at every level of the field. JSN is primarily deep ball. I think during the power ranking shows, I talked about that a lot with Josh. Like Seattle's offense for like 3/4 of the year was mostly successful and living just off of the deep shots, which is why JSN's numbers were great. Now, in the last quarter of the year, his numbers trailed off a tiny bit, but that was because they were becoming a more complementary team. So, like, that was the ideal, right? Like, everything was working. Everybody was kind of bending towards him, and that made things successful for Seattle. So he was doing his job. Um, let's see. Puka was also more effective in the slot this year, which is funny because that was always JSN thing. He was always a
Right.
slot only
Going to be a
player.
slot only, wasn't going to work outside. Yeah.
And then on all routes from the wide alignment, Puka actually was right there with JSN in everything. So JSN had far fewer effective plays, expected points added as a slot receiver than Puka because he's doing all this work on the outside. Meanwhile, when Puka was on the outside, he was almost just as effective as JSN. So Jason was elite in the like one thing that he was doing all season long. Puka was near elite to elite at every aspect of being a receiver, right? Going up and making difficult catches,
Yeah.
catch and run, blocking, just like everything that he did. So the first thing you look at, like you said, is the statistics. Both guys had near or right around 120 receptions. They both had 10 receiving touchdowns. They both had about a little more than 1,700 yards. Yards per out run number was just under four for both of them. They led the league 1 and 2 in receiving first downs and 20 plus yard receiving plays. Both those guys were 1 and 2 in all those stats. Like that's nuts. So you look at that first and then you narrow down. And then when you just watch and then you dig into like how and where and why they're winning, Puka was just fantastic, just all across the board. So it's not even take away from what JSN did, but Puka just had had the extra added layer of the additional stuff that he was doing that JSN wasn't asked to do this season.
Yeah.
Sealed it for me with Puka as well.
Yeah, yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I know I mentioned his blocking in the run game, but like there was some times where they did use Puka as like as a screener or even like on end arounds and in the actual run game itself as the ball handler. So it's definitely the versatility that Puka had this season that was one of the trump cards for me for him over JSN, like you were saying.
Um, I had a couple other candidates in here, but I'm gonna keep those in my back pocket because we're gonna hit on one or two of them later on. So offensive player really came down to Puka and Jason. I imagine that'll be the case um for the award at the end of the season. And yeah, both Peyton and I went with Puka. Let's go to Coach of the Year, Peyton, because this was one of the awards that we were different on. Tell us who your Coach of the Year was.
This was probably the closest race of any of the ones that I was back and forth between for my picks, and I did end up going Ben Johnson. And then yes, this is kind of a bit contrarian because it's like which team did I want to be represented in my awards? And to be honest, I think that Ben Johnson's because the other guy is the there's an obvious favorite for this and he's probably going to winning the award and you're going to talk about him I believe so um, with Ben Johnson it's for me making the Bears an elite offense immediately and establishing the Bears as a future present and future contender in the NFC with just a complete offensive makeover but also establishing a like the intangible idea that they are never going to be out of a game. Like this team constantly was resilient in a way that I don't think I've seen from a first year head coach in the past. And yes, like people will toss it up to luck because of the way that a lot of these games ended. But ultimately, for them to do it over and over and over again, at some point, luck becomes just you are built for these kind of moments and to be mentally tough to the point where you are able to have the stability and have the wherewithal to close out these games. Um, additionally, like I'm the biggest bugaboo is like Ben Johnson's only really a primarily offensive coach, and while yes that's true, you do have to instill some kind of identity for the team as a whole. And even if the defense like was one of my least favorite units in the league, they did create turnovers at a
Yeah.
super high rate to the point where it's at some point that has to be tied back to a coaching philosophy, even, and so I think that it's just a matter of the elite offensive jump from last year to this year, especially with A, the run game, and B, with Caleb.
Hmm.
And not only that, but Ben Johnson having a heavy hand in bringing in some new weapons from the 2025 draft class that were immediate impact players, especially towards the second half of the season.
You mean the ones that I ripped him for on draft night?
Yeah,
Those ones? Yeah.
yeah,
Okay, cool.
exactly.
Yeah, good stuff.
Those guys. Um, I just couldn't have, if you had asked me probably in, let's just say, if you had asked me who my coach of the year would have been in week, let's say 13, probably would have a very different answer. But this is one of the cases where I think recency bias is fine to kind of come into play because of what happened to the Bears down the stretch and where they ended up in the playoffs and how we saw them perform in that way. I couldn't help but be swayed by it. So that's why I ended up going with Ben Johnson.
This has the chance. I love this pick. This has the chance to be like the most impactful coach hiring of the 2020s and like maybe into the 2030s
Yes, agreed.
because this was the prodigal son play caller, an offensive mind that passed up on what two coaching cycles
Yeah,
before he
it
took a head coach job,
yes.
and then the quarterback that was the most talented quarterback prospect since Trevor Lawrence. So, which is funny that it's only like 4 years, 3 years, whatever it was. But um, when the guy Trevor Lawrence doesn't work out the way people want right away, that's a big deal. So I mean, this is we're talking about a quarterback that has like best quarterback in the league potential and head coach that was elite offensive builder, offensive mind plus maybe some other stuff potential who grew up under Dan Campbell, right? So like you get the hearts and smarts and you get literally the hearts and the smarts and you're putting them together on one of the NFL's most storied franchises. And we're in the middle of this coaching cycle right now where people are starved for the offensive mind that they can rip away from a place. You're never going to have that here. You're never going to have that here. So if this is any level of successful, it's going to be very successful for a very long time because you're going to have those two sewn up. So this is a great pick just for the proof of concept that
Yeah.
holy smokes, this worked. And
Yeah.
man, it really only worked and caught fire for like the second half of the season because of the way Ben Johnson implemented all this stuff that got off to a slow start offensively. So as long as they keep this roster like fairly competent, and I think you spend this offseason just like invested in the trenches for your run defense and fortify that offensive line, which is already aging in the middle and injured at the tackle. But I like they're in good shape. I love this.
Yeah.
I had to Google who the betting favorite was because I don't see all that very often. Um, and no, I'm not going with that. I'm not going with Mike Vrabel, although Ben Johnson and Mike Vrabel really did help themselves by having great coordinator hires. You mentioned Ben Johnson, and like, yeah, he didn't have his hand in the defense, but he hired Dennis Allen and Hal Harris, who are specialty defensive back-minded coaches. Al Harris is getting defensive coordinator interviews, and Dennis Allen obviously has been a very good defensive coordinator. So Ben Johnson has those guys. He brought them on staff, so he gets credit for that. Mike Vrabel has Josh McDaniels, who we'll talk about, and he sets himself up for a long line of success with McDaniels and Drake May, so that's great. Um, but I'm going with a guy that I think had actually the toughest road to be the head coach this season, especially from newcomers. And it's the other coach in the AFC that turned around his 4-13 team to 13-4. And I'm going with Liam Cohen. Um, there are so many worthy candidates this year, but Cohen, I think, had the most up and down road in terms of like how many chapters of the season took place for Jacksonville and yet finished with a 13-4 record. Um, he, I talked about hiring coordinators. He hired a first time OC and DC. He's not this like, he's a first time head coach in the NFL. And he doesn't have this like long history in the NFL, right? He's done like a couple years here, went to college, a couple years here, and now he's a head coach. So he doesn't have this like same catalog of NFL coaches. He's not Mike Vrabel, and he could say, "Hey, Josh, you were my offensive coordinator for like half of my career. Will you come be my offensive coordinator right now?" He's not Ben Johnson, who is under the Dan Campbell tree, who has worked with Dennis Allen and could just call Dennis Allen and say, "Hey, Dennis Allen, come over here. Hey, Lions staff, everybody come with me." Most of the Bucs staff stayed in Tampa Bay when Liam Cohen left. So he had to go out and get these pretty unknown coordinators, Anthony Campanile and Grant Udinski.
Grant, yeah, I was gonna say, I can't
And
remember how
those
his
guys are getting
second name.
head coaching interviews. These guys
Yeah,
were not known. People were clowning Liam Cohen when he made these hires because they're like, see, this is why it's not going to work out because he doesn't have the charisma. He doesn't know, hey, he doesn't have the body of work. He's not going to know enough people to get good coordinators. And now those guys are getting head coaching interviews. That's huge for me. So not only did he handle his business as the head coach and offensive implementer and designer to take this team to 13-4, his coordinators did a great job at what they were expected to as well. Next is the quarterback. Trevor Lawrence had fallen out of public favor, and to many, we thought we already knew what his ceiling was, and he was never going to reach it again. After his second year 2 years ago, his play had dwindled each of the last 2 years before he was revitalized by Cohen in year 5 of his career. Vrabel and Ben Johnson and Vrabel by extension, Josh McDaniels did great with their young quarterbacks, putting them in situations to succeed. But those were highly talented second year quarterbacks, right? So like that jump was kind of expected. Trevor Lawrence was in year 5. We thought it was donezo, right? We were like, okay, this is your last breath, basically. And Liam Cohen did it. And now maybe based on the other things I'm going to talk about with Cohen, if we hit the ground running next year, like Trevor Lawrence might get to be in those like MVP or top 5 quarterback conversations again during his career. Not something we thought was going to happen going into 2025. But the most important thing for me is the Jags stumbled during the season. Early on, the receivers weren't meshing with the passing concepts. Remember all those middle of the field pass attempts? They're short arming it, not wanting to contact. What did Cohen do? He adjusted, started throwing out routes to those guys, right? Started letting them get the ball on the perimeter and get running. That worked. Then injury struck the offensive line and receivers. Cohen adjusted again. Travis Hunter, the second overall pick, both sides of the ball player, traded future first to get him out for the season midway through the year, and he never really even found his footing. And yet Cohen kept on moving. The run game faltered after a successful like first month and a half, and the pass game picked up in its place. The offensive line had a bunch of shuffling, and they found a diamond in the rough who they gave an extension to. So adjusting to the situation, taking what your reality is, and instead of making excuses, game planning, getting into whatever it is, the meeting room, the film room, like the locker room, wherever he had to go to find answers and instill the confidence in his team to, hey, this is now what we're going to do and adjust and have good answers and be able to successfully implement that during the season. That's coaching at its best. And so the fact that he had like, and I don't want to do this thing where we have to talk down every candidate we didn't pick, but like Vrabel came in and like righted the ship. Josh McDaniels installed a good offense, and the Patriots were off and moving. And Ben Johnson put Caleb Williams through the ringer the first, through training camp in the first month of the season. Williams rose to the occasion, and they were off and running. Cohen came in with a plan, got punched in the mouth, implemented a new plan, punched in the mouth again, implemented a new plan, and it's not like they were like some 9-8 scrappy team, 13-4. And we're like a couple plays away from going and playing this Broncos team in the divisional round. So I love what Liam Cohen did this year. And I'm really excited about what's to come. But this year will always be really impressive. So that's why he's my pick.
And a point to kind of both of the coaches that we ended up picking, both of them kind of have an element of like the prince that was promised to them,
Hmm.
coming to fruition in different ways. Obviously, you kind of talked about Ben Johnson's way where it's, you know, he passed on 3 coach cycles. We knew that this was the next guy, the next McVay, kind of next Shanahan type of um, offensive mind that was going to be gifted a job like whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted and whatever team he wanted. Like he had his pick of the litter. And then in a way, Cohen kind of had that same element to him as well, where even if it wasn't in the same way as Ben Johnson, for years this guy's name was brought up as like
Hmm.
he's going to be one of these next gen offensive minds. We just are kind of trying to wait and see when he's going to get his opportunity. This is like dating back to when he was on McVay's staff with the Rams, when he was
Hmm.
even just I think he was offensive coordinator at Kentucky, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay, so like and that was when Will Levis was there. He made Will Levis into an elite NFL prospect, which is a feat within itself. But it's just a matter of that we knew Liam Cohen kind of like even if it wasn't to the same extent of Ben Johnson, we knew both of these guys were eventually going to get their shots, and to see both of them come to fruition in very different kinds of situations is really cool. And I think both of them are deserving to of this award and of us talking them the way that we have.
Let's go to assistant coach of the year. I'm going to go first just because I've already mentioned him, but I went with Josh McDaniels for the Patriots. I wanted to show some love to the Patriots in some way and shed some light on a very important topic, which are some coaches are just meant to be coordinators and not head coaches. And I hope McDaniels is an OC for the next 10 years because I think he's truly just really good at it and that bad at being a head coach. But New England was third in offensive DVOA this year, second in EPA per play, second in points. And that's with the run game not yet being super effective and Drake May taking a ton of sacks this season. So to overcome those things and have a really efficient, high octane offense is also really good coaching and game planning and like, hey, what's our install for this week and okay, how are we gonna mitigate this and what are we gonna do here in these situations? Um, and for McDaniels coming in and like this is the first year he worked with May and like they got off on a great first step obviously. So I just liked a lot of what McDaniels did this year. And again, just in a world where every time a coordinator has a successful season, we tout them as the next head coach. We've done that 3 times with McDaniels. Maybe we don't do it a fourth. And this just a couple hours ago, Brian Flores like essentially is going to re-up with the Vikings as DC. And would I like him to get a chance as a head coach again because he got drafted the first time? Yes, I would like that. But you know what? At the end of the day, look at Spags, man. Like sometimes it's great to just be a really freaking good coordinator, and when your contract is up, become the highest paid one again every single year and stay in a good situation. It's not bad. So, assistant coach of the year for me is Josh McDaniels. What did you do here, Peyton?
This was next to the Ben Johnson Vrabel for Coach of the Year race for me, the second closest one. And it was between Ejiro Evero and Clint Kubiak. And I went Evero because, to me, I think that the Panthers, despite being an 8-9 division champion, do somewhat deserve to be talked about in the sense that this is a defense that was historically bad last year.
Hmm.
One of the worst that we've seen
Hmm.
in the history of the NFL. And even if it wasn't like even good all the time, the defense went from being god awful to the point where the defense was what they were relying upon in many
Yeah.
of the games this season to win the game for them or keep them in a game and give them an opportunity to win, and even if Bryce Young did fall short. And to me, the fact that Evero was able to do that with the best player, both their best defenders coming off of like gruesome injuries from the past
Hmm.
year, and
Yep.
in Derek Brown, J.C. Horn, and then staying healthy most of the year, and then outside of that, a lot of the roster was built off of these like not even top tier free agents, like the kind of the Christian Rosebooms of the world, even like
Hmm.
Trayvon Morig is a good player, but he's not necessarily like a Pro Bowl caliber safety. So
Right.
it's not this these super talented free agents they get in, and then the rest of the defense was guys like Nick Scorton who came in as a rookie was able to be super impactful. Guys like Latham Ransom who were asked to play like
Hmm.
like a pretty substantial amount of snaps as a I think fourth round pick.
Sounds right.
Um, I think that it's just a matter, and then getting a guy like Mike Jackson coming in from Seattle to just completely level up his play to a point where we did not think that that was in his bag. I think that overall, even if yes, at best, maybe this defense was like at best above average, right? Like somewhere in that like 13 range. To go from what we saw last year to this year without any real substantial roster ads on that side of the ball outside of like a second round pick pass rusher who wasn't necessarily viewed as like one of these elite guys last year. Um, and without any key free agents and really just getting like a couple of your guys back from injury,
Hmm.
I found that to be very impressive.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, like Clint Kubiak in a very different way is impressive, but to me, I think that I wanted to give some shine to maybe somebody who, despite not being, one of the top 10 units on that side of the ball, it's about the improvement from last to what we saw last year to this year for me.
Yeah, when that offense is not going to be a top half of the league offense, you need that defense cannot be the worst defense in the NFL,
Right.
a bottom five defense, if the team is going to be competitive at all, right? It's like both sides of the ball were just mediocre enough that they were able to win their division, and that's a big deal, right? So the like if you wanted to make a case for like a similar situation, it'd be like, well, why not Robert Saleh, right? Who
Right.
took also a bad defense
Right.
and coached them up to like first off, the Panthers were a little better than the 49ers on defense this year, but like the 49ers defense was always going to have their offense to rely on, right? That was not the case for Carolina. So
No.
to get that team, to get the Panthers without that major addition to the level of just being able to do enough to keep their offense competitive and put them in the situation in this offseason where they have a lot of flexibility in what they could do. You never want to stagnate, right? So you always want to do something to either side of the ball. You don't want to was it the Cardinals this offseason that like didn't do anything for didn't add any offensive players, right? And then look what
Yeah.
happened.
Yeah.
You don't want to do that, but like you're not like, okay, we need to trade up for a top edge rusher in the draft. We need to get from 15 to 8 because or at 8 again, and we have to take the best edge rusher,
Right.
even though we really like this, Sonny Styles better or something like that. They're not in that situation, and I think we talked about that during the award, an award in the season, where they're at a pretty level playing field across the board with their roster, and Evero and the coaching job he's done is a huge part of that. Um, let's throw it to a couple division winners here. So this is the AFC East. This is the Stephen Gostkowski Award. We both picked the Bills preseason. Obviously goes to the Patriots. We've kind of already gushed about like what McDaniels and Vrabel have done as coaches this year. Drake May is awesome. I'm sure we'll get into that later. Um, and the Bills, like, yes, very disappointing exit to the playoffs. That's not what we're here to talk about. They still had a good year. What did they end up winning? 11, 12 games
11
in the
games,
regular
I think.
season?
Yeah. Yeah.
So like still a good Bills season. Like and like the Bills were in it till the end. They beat the Patriots in that week. I don't know, it was a double digit week game. So like
Yeah.
this wasn't one of the other division upsets where the Bills just fell off. This was a good race for the AFC East. But shout out to the Patriots. They get the Stephen Gostkowski Award. Anything on the AFC East you want to say? Patriots, Bills?
Um, I just think that I don't necessarily want to get into like playoff conversations, but with the Bills, I I do just want to see if you agree. Like you would agree that this is probably, given that they, even if they didn't win the division, the roster itself is probably the worst of like the last, I don't know, 3 seasons.
For the Bills? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that even though a lot of Bills fans are going in general, you know, NFL community is probably at the point where it's just maybe they're just kind of like done with the Bills until they actually see it,
Yeah.
in the postseason. I think there's an element to where this team can get a lot better in a lot of different ways. And I think it's just kind of a keep the faith situation and don't just assume that the Bills are just never going to do anything of note past, the divisional round or even the conference championship game.
And yet, I tweeted today that I'm taking the under on the Bills for the foreseeable future because their owner gets up there in that press conference with
Well, that,
Brandon
yeah.
Beane and says says what he
Yeah.
says in there, and I'm not trusting what's happening upstairs right now, but from a Josh Allen and like the pieces of the roster and what they could still do with it, yeah, there's on paper a
Yes.
lot to believe in, especially Josh Allen. I'm not worried about Josh Allen
Yeah.
at all.
You
I'll
do
be
make
worried
a
about him
great
in four
point. Yeah.
years when he wants to leave because man, those that was a joke. Those two are a mess. Anyways, we're not
Yeah.
doing that right now. Shout out Josh Allen, you'll be all right. Uh, NFC, let's do the NFC North because we were also talking about them. This is the Mason Crosby Award. We both picked the Packers preseason, so we went away from the Lions, but we went Packers, and it was obviously the Bears. And we talked about Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams plenty already. But any notes for you on the Packers and the end of their season?
I guess just a matter of I mean, is it just as simple as you get a few guys back on defense, including Micah Parsons, and maybe everything is a little bit better, and it's not all doom and gloom after that Bears loss?
Yeah, between like that mid-November to mid-December time where Watson got re-injured and
Yeah,
Jordan Love got hurt and Malik Willis was hurt while
yeah.
he was
Who
playing
was it?
and Micah
Who was it
Parsons
on the
got
line
hurt.
that got hurt? Was it Zach Tom?
Yes, Zach Thomas
Yeah,
several games. Yep,
yeah,
100%. Some the upset Packers fans will say, "Well, look at Shanahan and that offense.
yeah,
All those guys were hurt too." And yes, that's true.
yeah.
Um, but that's
Devontae
a
Wyatt
much
got
different,
injured. Yeah,
and that's a much different infrastructure. And yeah, the D, well, I mean, Halfley was there for a couple of years, but that roster had changed over time. You're not as good as the 49ers. Okay, we'll
yeah,
say that. But I think it was just a very weird circumstance because right before all those guys were getting hurt, I mean, Josh and I put them at like two in our power rankings because they were just on a run of like
yeah,
when everything's good and clicking, this team is so well balanced. So yes, I wouldn't worry. I'm happy LaFleur got his extension. We'll have
yeah,
to see what they do at defensive coordinator. But I imagine when Micah Parsons is back, they will be just fine considering the rest of those linebackers that they have and the rest of the guys on that front. They do need some help at corner, but that'll be an
yeah.
offseason discussion. Let's do a couple more of these real quick. NFC South, we just talked about the Panthers. We both predicted the Bucks. It went to the Panthers. But the Bucks, another team that just like marred by injuries from like week 4 on. Not much else to say there. And that was the Morton Anderson Award. Shout out Morton Anderson. And the Mike Kofer Award. We both went 49ers and it went to the Seahawks. So we've talked about Jason a little bit. We'll continue to talk about the Seahawks. Actually, anything you want to say on the 49ers? Because then we can actually roll into a Seahawks conversation next.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say that in hindsight, I mean, well, I say in hindsight, obviously we didn't plan on Fred Warner and Nick Bosa getting hurt, so maybe that's part
Yeah,
of it.
yeah,
As early as they did, but more importantly, I think that the way the offense and just the coaching factor of how that elevated the team across the season, even if we were like technically wrong, it literally came down to week 18 still.
yeah.
And yes, it was like not really a close game. It was not as close as the score reflected. Um, that to me says that like sometimes like our process was right. The
Yeah.
results just weren't there. That's okay.
It if you had made me put a win prediction when we predicted the 49ers, I probably would have said 12 wins because I hated this defense from August.
Yeah.
Um, but I just knew the offense, no matter who, where, or when got beat up, it was going to be top 10 at least. So I probably would have said 12 wins. They just happen to be in division with the team that won 14 games. So let's do our executive of the year because we both have John Schneider for the Seattle Seahawks. Talk about Schneider and the job Seattle did putting their team together to win 14 games, win the NFC, win the NFC West, and now are playing for a shot at a Super Bowl.
First off, I mean, I think that historically speaking, we do give the award to an executive who made a lot of moves but leading up to the season, but then there's also some kind of like carryover effect from like the previous year sometimes.
Hmm.
And that's where like Schneider being willing to get rid of Pete Carroll, bring
Yep.
in McDonald, and just completely change the feeling around the team and just the general demeanor around how they wanted to approach the last 2 seasons. But then more importantly, it's like after they built that last year, it's Schneider evaluating the roster and seeing what McDonald did last year and saying, I know what needs to be done. Having the wherewithal, like just the guts to say, we're going to trade Gino. We're going to then also really like put your money where your mouth is with Sam. Even though I know the
Hmm.
contract is like a little like he technically could have moved off it, but it doesn't look like they're going to do that based on
Yeah,
what
no.
the returns are. Um, Moving off of DK Metcalf, who was like a at the time probably the face of the franchise. You know,
Hmm.
given like jersey sales and all that kind of stuff, which yes, I know very overrated player to many, but that does matter whenever you're trading away the guy who
Uh-huh.
probably your fan base has the most jerseys of. Um, and then in addition to that, I mean, you know, even if the whole draft class wasn't like banger, 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 over the course of the season, the fact that you just nail Gray Zabel and Nika Miwari 1-2 it pays dividends because you really in those two picks kind of reset the identity of both sides of the ball in a lot of ways. And there's not many times where you can say that about like just two picks, one on offense, one on defense, where it changes a team as much as these two guys did. And then even if it's not the most impactful from a statistical standpoint, him, in addition to bringing in Clint Kubiak and going to midseason and getting one of Kubiak's guys in Rashid
Hmm.
Shaheed and saying like,
Yeah.
this is the guy that we need to unlock not only special teams impact, but a certain part of our offense that we still haven't even really seen them tap into.
No.
We
Hmm.
saw them do it a lot more in the NFC Championship game, but there's still stuff that hasn't even really been unpacked that I wonder if they're just saving and sitting on for these last two games with Shaheed. So I do think that even though he hasn't had the biggest statistical impact, I think that from their offensive philosophy, it's been well worth the pick that they traded away for it. So just the aggressiveness, the array of moves in the not only the draft but also free agency, also trading, like all three facets of
Hmm.
the so-called movement of a roster is what sealed it for me for Schneider.
Yeah, this was an easy one for me as well, and I echo literally all the I for beat for beat. I had those things written down from moving on to Carroll to making the change at quarterback to all the ancillary moves, creating whether you want to say the identity is in his mold or McDonald's mold, executing the roster moves to get to the identity of where it is right now is really good stuff. So I went with Schneider as well. Let's continue this Seattle Seahawks conversation though, because you mentioned him, we both have the same defensive rookie of the year. And that's Nick Eamon, defensive back for Seattle. Um, Defensive rookie is always so hard. You can go with Abdul Carter, who probably looked like the best rookie just from an eye test standpoint, and he leads the league in quick pressures, which is crazy for a rookie to do. But low sack production, bad defense, losing team, questions about off field character stuff steer me away. James Pierce, 10 and a half sacks, which is great. Amazing. You traded a future first round pick for him. I thought it was a horrible move. Obviously, I still do. But 10 and a half sacks as a rookie, not a lot of people do that, and that's great. But he played less than 60% of the Falcons' defensive snaps this year. Um, he wouldn't even be my pick from his own team, just FYI. We can get into that later. But I'm going with Nicky Manwari as well as you. As a rookie, he played over 700 snaps for the Seahawks, one of the two most important defenses of the season. His flexibility really unlocked a lot of their defense as a big physical slot player that can play in the box like a linebacker or cover like a corner and like actually do those things. Not we say it because we're putting him in the slot or because he's a box safety. He can actually do those things. And he's not a bit player because I mentioned the 700 snaps, but he was also seventh on the Seahawks in defensive snaps. So like he's not the first guy that's rotating out when they're rotating people out. He is out there. He's a legitimate starter for them, even as a nickel corner, because they want to play in nickel a majority of the time. In the last 10 years, the only other rookie to have played 700 snaps, have 10 passes defended, 80 combined tackles, and 5 TFLs is Jalen Petrie. And like Jalen Petrie a freaking stud, man. Like we love that guy. So, I don't know if anymore his like ceiling is going to be higher than Petrie. I don't know if this is going to be like a Trent McDuffie kind of all pro slot corner, Derwin James, Marlon Humphrey kind of situation or not. That's not really what I'm worried about. It's as a rookie doing this much on the defense that was this good, for a team that was this good. That's why he's my defensive rookie of the year.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think that for me, a lot of it is related to the eye test over, just looking at the box scores of like Carson Schweschinger or James
Hmm.
Pierce, and saying, oh, like, Carson super high on the the tackles list and just play on the field all the time, like the center of the defense, so to speak. Not actually like the cornerstone. We'll get to that, I'm sure. But um with Eman Worry, it's just a matter of he kind of felt like the skeleton key for the defense in many ways. In the same way that like a lot of these teams are modeling the way that they operate on defense as finding their Kyle Hamiltons and being able to have the versatility at the safety position, moving
Hmm.
them around, and he just fits that role so well to the point where a lot of Seahawks fans are having Cam Chancellor flashbacks of like
Mm.
this guy who's just speed, power, agility, and like just has such sound play at the position to where, like you said, he's not being rotated off the field all the time. He's reliable. He doesn't have they are not worried about him making mistakes this early in his career. And this is a guy that I will say part of the reason why I chose him is like this is a guy that I wasn't even really that sold on as a
Hmm.
rookie. Like I
Hmm.
wasn't like coming into the league, I was
Yep.
like, yeah, it's kind of an in betweener. I'm not like I don't know what to do with this guy. He was the combine freak that everybody kind of fell in love with after that, and he shot up boards, and it's just like I really wasn't buying into it. And I think that part of me and my like internal bias is whenever somebody does kind of prove me wrong and I see them play as well as they do as a rookie in a manner that seems translatable, like it's not just a
Hmm. Right.
scheme like kind of allows this guy to pop off for a year and then maybe
Hmm.
people adjust to it. This seems pretty sustainable to
Yeah.
the point where I'm like I just have to tip my hat to them and say I was wrong, like in a manner, and I have to respect it, and just gave him the award for that.
It's one of those where, yeah, I had a lot of questions up for him too. I mean, I remember when people were talking about him as like a top 20 pick as we got closer to the draft. And I think I had him like, where was he take? Was he the 41st pick? Or is that where I had him on my board? Now I
I
need to
don't
look.
remember, but like for me, it was
Evan
like I
Boyd.
remember
Yeah.
watching him at South Carolina. I'm like, this dude isn't even the best guy on the defense. He's going to be like taken ahead of some of these other dudes.
Right. He was pick 35. They might have even traded up to get him. I think they did.
Yeah,
I
I
think
think
that was
so.
part of I think one of their DK picks they used to move up for him. I think I had him like 41, 42. I had him outside the top 40. But then when he goes to Seattle, I'm like, okay, well, that's probably a perfect, like, if it's going to work, like, that's where it's going to work at.
Yeah,
So it's one of those where the team and player situation match up perfectly.
yeah.
My others considered, you mentioned him, Carson Schweschinger from the Cleveland Browns, middle linebacker. In the last 10 years, the only other rookie to play 700 snaps was my like minimum. 700 snaps and 150 more combined tackles was Shaq Leonard in 2018. So Schwarzenegger just being on the field, linebacker has been awful for the Browns for years, like years and years and years. And your guy JOK, they had him for a little bit, and then you don't know
Got
if
the
he's
neck
coming
thing.
back.
Yeah,
But even then, it was not like this. And Schwarzenegger just feels like you can put him in the middle of the defense and good communicator, good in coverage, can play the run, can tackle, pretty good at everything. The other guy I considered. I'm pretty sure you like this guy too, Xavier Watts with the
yes,
Falcons.
loved him.
Um,
I knew that's who you were talking about too. Whenever you said like he wasn't even the
the
Falcons
James
rookie, I
Pierce
was
thing.
like,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I remember watching Watts' film and just being like, oh, well, this guy's just gonna be a 10-year free safety in the NFL. Like he just like moves perfectly back there, reads everything perfectly. Like, and man, he was hitting people this year too. So he had 90 combined tackles, which I did not expect. Um, and similar to Oh, wow, I didn't even realize that was Petrie again. Uh, similar to Eamon Worry, 700 snaps, 5 interceptions, 90 combined tackles. The only other person to do that in the last 10 years was Jalen Petrie. Petrie's sick, man. I
Peach is
love
pretty
that guy.
good, man.
Freaking love that guy. So yeah, those are the other two guys I consider Schwarzenegger and Watts. Um, let's hit offensive rookie of the year. Since we're here talking about the rookies, we both have the same guy for this, and it's Tedero McMillan, wide receiver for the Carolina Panthers. Talk to me about why you went with McMillan.
I'll be honest. This is kind of a weak offensive rookie of the year class. like
Yeah.
I mean, there really wasn't that many choices to pick from. It's kind of what it boiled down to for me. So, in a offensive rookie of the year class like this, I look at the quarterbacks and it's like, man, am I really gonna give it to Cam Ward, who kind of like just showed flashes but wasn't really that
Hmm.
good most of the year?
Yeah.
Um, whether it be because of the roster around him or because of him, TBD. But um, am I gonna give it to Tyler Shuck, who looked awesome? And like, sure, if you pace out on a 17 game
Right.
pace, would have definitely won the award. But
Yep.
then he only played 8 games. So it's like, all
Yeah.
right, what do you do? Like, what do you even do with that? And
Hmm.
then it's kind of the same thing with Dart. Like,
Yeah.
it's looks great at times. Like, had some really memorable moments throughout the season, but ultimately, it's like, did he play enough for him to even get on, have serious consideration for the award? And then at that point, it's like Tet is the only guy who was just out there all the time, productive. You immediately, like, he jumps off the tape whenever you watch him on Carolina, and it was pretty immediate that it was like, all right, yeah, he's going to be a guy for a
Yeah.
while in the NFL. Whether or not he'll ever be, an All Pro or something like that, that's TBD. But he's definitely got the goods immediately. He changed the Carolina passing game immensely by just, even if he wasn't super involved like that, him being on the team single handedly almost made us like believe that Bryce Young is not Bryson Young, goodness, Bryce Young is possibly a guy worth giving a Baker tier extension to, and which we did not think that a year ago. Now, granted, there is a bit of like chicken or the egg scenario with, like, is
Hmm.
Bryce improving and then just Tet happens to be there and the guy who's on the field, or is it that Tet being like the first real like, I don't want to call him elite, but like talent wise, elite
Yeah.
caliber wide receiver,
Hmm.
is that what kind of causes Bryce Young's play to elevate? It's just by having that guy on the roster. So I felt like he was really the only worthy choice.
He's the only guy, and I wish in season I had the time to do the work on the offensive lineman the way I do in the off season. Because I know people, or my Membu makes a bunch of starts
Yeah,
and,
yeah,
is really consistent. And, everyone watched him for the first 3, 4 weeks and we're like, wow, Membu's really good. And then we haven't talked about him since then. So that probably means things were going well. Like Ray Zabel is another one you can mention.
yeah,
Um, but we don't have the best stats for that. And,
yeah.
I don't get to dig into all that during the season. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, I will say that, like, I even considered, like, I do not typically consider offensive linemen for offensive rookie of the year. But if there were ever a year that I was gonna do it, it was like this year with with Membu and with Kelvin Banks. Even like had a really good rookie season, even though like nobody was really watching New
Hmm.
Orleans first half of the
Right.
year. Like, Gray's able, like you mentioned, and but the problem is, like, how do you quantify that in a way? And
Yeah.
that's
And
like that's like the I think that we're gonna get to a point where we can, like you're saying. It's just that, like, right now we don't really know how to put it into a way that makes sense for this kind of award.
because like Banks probably doesn't have he probably has stats that are like, oh, he allowed a lot of sacks, but that's because Shuck holds onto the ball. And then vice versa, like on Protector of the Year, not that we're not doing that tonight, but I heard a lot of people say Garrett Bowles, right? Because he's had a great year. The Broncos were great. That Broncos offensive line has been so good the last 2 seasons. And it's like he has all these snaps and no sacks allowed. And it's like, well, that's because Bo Nix is a one read guy or throws the ball away or runs, right? So, and like effective, good job. Um, but like, does that mean Bowles was winning that many snaps? And that's stuff that I just don't know until I watch in the offseason. So, anyways, shout out my offensive line, and bad job on me for not doing Protector of the Year again, but I'll feel better about being able to do that when I can actually sit down and watch all the guys the way that I want to. Anyways, Tedero McMillan, also my pick, had over 1,000 yards, 7 touchdowns for the Panthers this year. This was the big one for me. He led all of their wide receivers in snaps. He was legitimately wide receiver one for this team that made a leap on offense, a quarterback that made a leap, small leap, but a leap. Um, and considering all the like pre-draft concerns people were saying about him, not on this network, by the way. Shout out Box Score Network. Um, just like immediately rolled in and was just like a good starting legitimate wide receiver. Maybe he's not going to be a wide receiver one, maybe he's not going to be an all pro, but like he could be out there on a good offense and we just saw it. So just the fact that we know he's a dude and yeah, he put it out all season because listen, we still think Emeka Ibuka's a dude, but he got hurt halfway through the year and his production fell off. So um McMillan gets this pretty easily, I would say. But I reserve the right to, in the middle of July, when I've gotten to watch some of the rookie offensive linemen, their seasons back, tell you if I thought one of them actually had a better year than Teteroa McMillan did. Let's see. Speaking of guys that well, actually, you know what? Since we're talking, we just talked about the rookies. Let's talk about a team that has a chance to make a big move at rookie next year, and it's our first overall pick award. I still have not named this yet, because I think I'm still waiting on, was it the Brown? It was the Browns and somebody else lead the NFL history in most first overall picks taken. So I'm waiting to name it after one of them, and that tie has not been broken yet. Maybe I'll look it up while we talk a little bit. But first overall pick award, my prediction was the Dolphins preseason, which looked really good for the first 6 weeks of the year, and then your prediction was the Saints, and it ultimately is the Raiders. So Peyton, the Raiders have the number one overall pick. Tom Brady, Spytech, ownership, they were all at that NCAA championship game. Fernando Mendoza, Heisman, all all but seemingly locked up to be the first overall pick. We don't have to talk about the Dolphins or Saints, but talk about the Raiders. Like, it's man, pretty disappointing season. Obviously, clearing house from a coaching perspective. We still don't know who their coach is going to be. But they have a new coach and new quarterback, new first overall pick coming their way. Talk to us about the Raiders,
Well,
or
funny
anything you want to
enough,
say about the Raiders is probably the
I
better way
I
to
just
frame
think
that.
that based on what my preseason expectations were for this team, like I didn't think that they were going to be terrible, but man, was this just one of the bigger like disappointments just from a sense of going into the season, we kind of had this idea that they might not be a playoff team. They're at least going to be respectable, right? Because you have Pete Carroll, you have Geno Smith, you have like I guess I would say the illusion of stability is, and turns out that was not. It was definitely an illusion. And granted, Brock Bowers getting injured and Jacoby Myers kind of being unhappy the whole time does it did diminish their passing game quite a bit, but the idea that
Remember
you
when Amari
also
Cooper went there for like 2 days and then retired?
yes, it was like I'm good. That
That's
that
really
should have been the
telling now,
sign.
isn't it?
That should have been like a dead giveaway.
Someone,
That's
some shout out whoever this is. Somebody tweeted this that was like, should we be concerned or something like that? And guess we should have
nobody
been.
said anything.
And then we just moved on. We just moved on. Yeah.
That should have been a red flag and dead giveaway that things were not going to go well. But I mean, and then boiling down to you take Ginty with the fifth overall pick, and it's just like you don't even know how to use him in a way that makes your offense any different than it was the year before. Really, like it ultimately, like yeah, sure, it was a little better, but it ultimately did not do anything differently to give your team more success. And I just pretty catastrophic failure. Like ultimately, based on what the goal was for the season, to be like have this sense of like this team's going to be competitive and maybe even like be a borderline sneaky playoff team, to then being the worst team in the league is a very drastic outcome from what we expected.
Yeah, I was never in the boat that I thought they could be competitive for the playoffs, but I was certainly in the boat that it would look competitive on the
Sure.
field.
Yeah.
And for that to be such, even that modest
Yes.
expectation be such a big miscalculation, I don't think anyone, and that's probably, I'm sure plenty of people were like, Pete Carroll, 73 years old, becoming a coach again? Like, that sounds insane. Um, but man, everything seemed right. Everything sounded good on a uh, podcast, I guess. I was going to say on a postage stamp, but that doesn't work, mixing metaphors. Um, all right, so tell me, Peyton, Raiders. We know a major not a majority. We know several coaches that have gone on to new teams. Harbaugh, Stefanski, Sala, Halfley. Those guys have new teams. So guys like Jesse Minter, Chris Shula are still out there. Joe Brady is still out there. Um, Several other head coaching candidates were pretty sure Fernando Mendoza is going to be the first overall pick. How do you feel about the Raiders' prospects for 2026? Should they take Mendoza and select a new head coach from this current crop of coaches that are out there?
Well, I think it's a foregone conclusion that they are going to take Mendoza at this point. So I guess at that point, it's what do Spytek and Brady do that best aligns with getting somebody who's going to, cultivate a winning. I don't want to say that's such a basic ass thing to say. Excuse me. Uh, who is going to kind of like harness it and allow him to? Because that's really what it boils down to. Is like, how are we going to make a franchise quarterback out of Fernando Mendoza? Step one.
Mhm.
And I think I guess if I'm, are you asking me kind of like to pick somebody because I do have an idea in mind,
You
and
can, but yeah, more just
I
can this be turned around at this point is what I'm
I
looking for.
I
Yeah,
definitely think
who do
it
you think
can
it's going to
be.
be?
I do think it can be turned around, and I think because of how much involvement I would expect Brady to have in like mentoring Mendoza, I would argue that I don't think that it's that important to have the offensive minded head coach. I think that it's my move would probably be to go to get Chris Shula, and then if he doesn't get hired as a head coach, bring guy passing game coordinator guy, can't remember his name.
Shieldhouse. Mm,
Yes, as your OC.
you're
That
just
would pro-
you're taking my Steelers staff. You have ever? What are you doing, man?
that
You
would
can't just
probably be
take
like
Pittsburgh Steelers head coach Chris Shula and offensive coordinator Nate Shieldhouse away from us. What are you doing?
that would be the dream. I think will that happen? I don't think so because I haven't seen any like smoke around that. I really have. What's funny is like for a team that has the first overall pick, I haven't seen like anything on the Raiders at all.
They
This
yeah, their coaching search was interesting. The people they were I do think they brought in Shieldhouse, but I don't know. I don't remember if they had brought in Shula. Um, Minter was high on their list, I think. But I think, and the Michigan ties, so that makes sense.
yeah,
They
makes
never did
sense.
the New England Bryans thing. I think Dayball might have come in, but Flores never came in, which ruined my Flores Dayball dream with Patrick Graham. Um, and Minter, as of this afternoon, like those strong ties to Baltimore seem like that's picking up, and he might be a leader in the clubhouse there. I know you said with Brady there not leaning offensive minded. I am kind of going the other way, where not only do I think it's going to be an offensive side of the ball guy, I think they're going to end up going Davis Webb and go pure. This is all about developing a quarterback, and let's surround him with some experienced coordinators. Maybe he's not even calling plays because he's coming from quarterback coach. He's not even coming from OC. So like, can you like Joe Joe Brady might be looking around without a head coaching or OC job. Can you get Joe Brady to be offensive coordinator or do you get I mean you wouldn't get Dave Hall to be offensive coordinator under Davis Webb, but and then can you get an experienced defensive coordinator? Wink Martindale. I'm
Do
trying to bring Wink Martindale back to the NFL. But do you bring some experienced coordinator or you keep Patrick Graham? What am I talking about? You keep Patrick Graham.
yeah.
You get Joe Brady to call the plays on offense and institute what the bones of the offense looks like. But Davis Webb is I'm here to foster a good situation for my quarterback and develop my quarterback. Um, that's kind of where I'm at with them. And that just feels like something that Brady would be cooking up.
That doesn't sound like a bad idea to go more offensive heavy. Now, I do have a question because I would do wonder the viability of that idea from a sense of like if that would actually happen. Because you mentioned Brady, because I know that Davis Webb is close with Josh Allen. Do you know
Mhm.
if Davis Webb has any kind of like crossover with Brady, like if in any capacity being on the Bill staff? Because I guess that would make sense then. I'm just curious because I actually don't know the answer to that.
I have no idea. Let's see. Where has Davis Webb been? I mean, as soon as he was done playing, he went straight to the Saints, as an assistant of sorts. Let's
Which, I
see.
mean, wasn't
Giants,
Joe
Bills,
Brady in New
Jets.
Orleans for a minute?
Yeah, I think that was before that though.
Okay.
Because he was with the Saints, I think, before he was at LSU.
Oh yeah, I
Um,
think you're right.
Probably not. Wow, he was really Davis Webb was really just up there. Giants, Jets, Bills, Giants. That was his whole career. Um, oh wow, okay, maybe Davis Webb never went to the Saints. Maybe he went straight to the Broncos in 23. Interesting. Um,
Anyways, okay, so no
I don't think
overlap
so. No, it
between.
does
Okay,
doesn't
anyways,
doesn't look like it.
I
Doesn't
was
look like
wondering if
it.
there was like any actual connection or if that was just more of a fit idea. So
They kind of the Raiders, and we'll move on. This is gonna be the thing we spend
yeah.
the longest on. Um, the Raiders did a lot of like the older retread guys, and then Minter and Webb like stood out as the like, and then maybe Showhouse as the young guys that
Hmm.
they and as soon as those two names came up as completely different from the others, that was when my antenna went up. So
Hmm.
Raiders, you got a chance. When Dante Moore decided to not come out, honestly, part of me was like, should the Raiders just like trade this first overall pick? Not that there's only one quarterback to go after. I did have that thought cross my mind, but I think with the way those guys were out there at the game and the game Mendoza had, I don't think that's happening at this point. But like,
I I think
should
if
they?
I think if anybody but Brady weren't involved, I like if there was some like super, like not to say it this way, but like if the Quasi Memphis school of thought type of like GM or
Uh-huh.
front office were in charge of the Raiders, I think there's a non-zero chance that they would trade that pick. Given just the it's the supply and demand factor of it, like there's one guy, literally one guy, and if you
Yep.
want him, like you're just gonna pay a
Like
boatload
like
for him.
could you get the Jets to trade 216 and two of those first next year? Because you're like, hey, the Browns are offering 627 and one first next year or first like can you create this massive bidding war? And this is what
Yeah,
people thought the Titans should have done last year, right? This was the same
right.
conversation
With Cam.
once this got to like kind of a one quarterback sort of first round. Um, it was kind of like, is it irresponsible at this point to not let the Browns come up or let the Giants come up or let, whoever come up and give this pick? It'd be interesting, but yeah, at the end of the day, I don't think it's gonna happen. All right, let's hit a couple more division winners real quick. Let's go to the AFC South where it's the Adam Vinatieri Award. I went with the Texans preseason, you went with the Jags, and obviously it ended up being the Jaguars.
I will say it's not the way that I thought it would happen, but I guess I was right in the end.
Yeah, the Texans just so many questions with how that offensive line
Yeah.
started the season out. Obviously, the defense was fantastic all the way through, but certainly now questions about CJ Stroud moving forward. So hopefully they can just throw enough resources at the line this year. Bet they wish they had Laramie Tunsil back after the year he had.
Yeah.
But that is water under the bridge. Let's stick in the AFC. Stick in the AFC. Go AFC North. Gary Anderson Award. The Ravens were both of our predictions. The Steelers won the division. Both teams are looking for a new head coach.
I think this is probably the most fascinating division to watch this offseason. Just
Yeah,
as a
man.
whole, because I think like obviously with the Steelers, it's like almost I don't want to say it's just going to be a complete shift from what you guys have experienced for the last 40 years, but it surely feels like this might be actually when it starts to be very different and a very weird era of the Steelers, like that we really haven't ever seen before. Um, and I hope that's not the case for you, for your sake. But I just realistically speaking, that's like probably what we're going to run into. Um,
Just do a wellness check if it's McCarthy and then Aaron Rodgers sticks around for another year.
God,
Just do
hadn't
it.
even thought about
Just call
that,
someone
but
to come check on me.
yeah. And then even
No, it's gonna be
in
Shula and Chilas. We're fine. We're fine.
yeah, and
It's okay.
even
It's okay.
with Baltimore, it's how do you try and keep the sanity of that roster together, like from not crashing out essentially. Like for lack of a better way of putting it, it's like it seems like they are a tier down from the Bills as far as like being snake bitten in the AFC, like
Hmm.
trying to win in this Lamar Jackson era. And it's just how do you kind of keep the faith enough with your next hire to sustain that? And like I'd be fascinated to see kind of like what the body language and like the language coming out of camp is like with the Ravens. And then there's like the fact that the Browns are just rebuilding again, and it seems like maybe they'll finally be able to kind of start to look past the Deshaun Watson pilled era where it's like this contract
Mm-hmm.
is looming over them, and maybe they can finally start rebuilding the roster. And then obviously the Bengals will still be interesting, but it will be, especially with the way that the Joe Burrow back and forth kind of wishy washy, you know, post game conferences and such. What do we kind of hear coming out of there in the offseason? So, but going back to like, I guess, any other thoughts, a lot of it is more related to like, what are we going to see going forward for the next like 4 months?
Other than Ben Roethlisberger, the two individuals that have defined the AFC North for the last 2 decades are gone. So all the ties to that era and that part of the rivalry are moved on from. I really just need this to be Shula and Minter, Steelers and Ravens respectively, and they're just kind of like, do we just keep this thing going the way
Right.
it's been
Just do the
going? They're
same
like, yeah,
thing.
let's just keep it moving, and everybody just keeps it moving. All right, next to let's wrap up the division winner awards. The Jason Elam Award to the AFC West champion. This is where you nailed it again. You went Denver, and it was the Broncos. I went Chiefs. What do you want to say about either of these teams?
um, I mean, the Broncos, it was kind of like this is one of the few division predictions where it was like, yes, it's kind of the way I saw it. Like kind of
Yeah.
the proof of concept for how this was going to happen kind of played out.
Yep.
Honestly, it's like, all right,
Yep.
I didn't expect Patrick Mahomes to tear his ACL, but like kind of a
Right.
year from hell for
Yes.
the
Oh
Chiefs a
yeah.
little bit.
hmm
Like even if it's just like a down year, um, the Broncos elevating offensively, and then obviously having like an elite defense to
hmm
pair with it. It's the formula that and the recipe that I had in my head that this was going to happen. This is like the only time where it feels. It's the only time it feels like in a long time where it was like, all right, so it pretty much went as planned. Cool.
Yeah. The best case scenario for the Broncos, obviously, win the AFC West, but when the defense is an elite defense, it's so hard to maintain that a second year. But for the regression to only stop them at what, like the fourth or fifth best
Yeah.
defense, like
Yeah.
still one of the defenses that mattered, but not one of the
Yeah.
two that define each season, really. So
Yeah.
so they made just enough of a step down. The offense made just enough of a step up to counteract that. And then yeah, just boy, oh boy, man. Even until they were eliminated, we had the Chiefs in like the top three of our power
Yeah.
rankings between me and Josh. So like that, this was a case of, you talk about regression, like one score regression games. They were like an 800 win team in one score games for 2 seasons, and then this year they're like 100,
Yeah.
a 10% win time in those situations. So came back to bite them. The roster needs an overhaul. Um, Eric Bieniemy is back. Who, you look at the years
Interesting.
that those tweets came. Bieniemy was the OC until 2022, and that was when things started to fall off. And now he's back, and Nagy's back out. And was that the year Nagy came back? It might have been. Um, Eberflus had what, 3 years? 22, 23, 24, 25 for Johnson? Maybe that might be it. That might be it.
Yeah.
So Kansas City Chiefs 2026, baby. Be ready for that Super Bowl prediction from me in a few months. Um, all right, so that's the AFC West, and then the final one, NFC East. Not a lot here. Jeff Eagles Award. We both predicted the Eagles. It was in fact the Eagles, but we don't necessarily feel great about
I don't know that I felt great about it. Like,
it. Even in August.
I mean, yeah, I
The
mean,
Super Bowl winner.
yeah, which I mean, it's well, I guess I mean when I say I feel great about, it, I guess I mean more so in regards to like Super Bowl defense,
hmm
but division was pretty. Like I don't think I ever doubted it division wise. I just didn't think that the other teams around them improved enough, and I think that everybody, the regression candidate that everybody saw coming was Washington, and so
Yep.
I think this division was very much the easiest one to predict amongst anybody. So.
All right, let's hit one of our made up ones. I don't have a graphic for this, but let's go with our most improved picks. I'll quickly just go most improved for the where do we have an AFC pick and an NFC pick each? For the AFC, I actually just went with my preseason pick of Trevor Lawrence. Um, vaulting back into that like quarterback that matters conversation. Um, was a big deal in the way he was playing, especially at the end of the year, and the way he played in that playoff game. Just I think really was everything that you were hoping to see from him, and to do it in year five when it wasn't like a steady increase and then an explosion. It was like bad rookie year, really good year two with the new head coach, and then slowly tracking back down before having a really good year this year. So I really like what Trevor Lawrence did this year. So he would be my pick in the AFC. Um, let's do one conference at a time. Who do you have for your AFC most approved?
I also have a Jaguar, but it's
Okay.
on the other side of the ball.
Okay.
I went with Devin Lloyd,
Heck
and
yeah. Love that.
this is a dude that was like, I don't think people realize how quickly this has turned around. This dude was going to be off the team.
Yeah.
Like they did not want it. Like if you ask Jags fans, hey, who was the worst first round pick over the last like 5 years before the 20, like we 4 or 5 weeks left last season, they would have said, oh yeah, Devin Lloyd, like get him off the team. And the end of last season, there was like some signs of life for him, and then this season, he is just turned into a demon. Like I don't know what happened in this offseason, but he has really become the player that he was drafted to be. In the sense of like this undersized linebacker that has elite athleticism, that's able to use it to like, has great ball tracking skills, who is just marketed as almost like um what's the way I'm gonna say this, like a game changing linebacker, in the sense of like he
Hmm.
can make on a single play basis change the game, and that
Yep.
happened so many times this year for him. And he is exactly what this defense needed in that linebacking core, because they don't really have any athleticism outside of him at that position. So I just am very happy, because I whenever the draft came around, I was like, man, I kind of like this guy. And then it was
Hmm.
immediate. It was almost immediate. Like, all right, this dude can't. This is not gonna work. And then
Yeah.
they just kept playing him and kept playing him. And it was like, as soon as we thought it was gonna be like, you know, not open season. What's the word? It was going to be like curtains, is what I was looking
Hmm.
for. I don't
Hmm.
know how I got those mixed up. As soon as we thought it was going to be curtains for Devin Lloyd, like he's just done in Jacksonville, and like he'll maybe be a backup, like rotational linebacker somewhere after this, but he's not. He then has a season where he's an All Pro. So, yeah, that was my most improved for the AFC.
It's the year of off-ball linebacker, man. Jack Campbell also makes a
Yeah,
leap. He was one of my guys for NFC that I thought about. He gets first team all pro. Jordan Brooks with Miami, right? Those fun years in Seattle, and then he gets lost in that mishmash of Tennessee, Miami, and wherever else. Um, he and Ernest Jones, who was my preseason NFC pick, who was also an all-pro second teamer, who's certainly in the discussion for me. So yeah, this era of the linebackers, man, Campbell, Lloyd, Brooks, Jones, and now we got Sonny Styles in the draft. There's a lot of linebackers to like coming up in the draft. So I don't know, man. Linebacker, Schwessinger, linebacker might be back, baby. We might be living in our best reality right now. My NFC pick though, I thought about the linebackers. I thought about Darnell Wright with the Bears, but that just always felt like the steady progression to me for him. But I ultimately went with JSN just to go from a like good complementary slot receiver to a legitimate number one outside receiver guy who's battling for offense player of the year. I don't necessarily know that like the talent really got any better. But I think just when and again the NBA for awards, when most improved player is always the tough one, right? It's like, do you just give it to the second year guy that like made the second year leap because in year two, um, and a lot of times the players specifically say it's hard to make the all star to all NBA leap. That's the actual hardest leap to make because the other ones it's just about usually like opportunity, minutes played, and how many shots you get to get up basically. But turning into the all pro guy takes all facets of the game. Like everything's actually running through you. The defense is paying attention to you more. So this for me for JSN, like you said with like target share, like he went from like DK being on one side and Gino ripping passes to tight ends, and he just got to be in the slot and find some open spaces. And now he's the number one target on this team that lives off the deep ball. So defenses know it's going to him. and he was super efficient, super effective at it. So this is where I gave JSN some love, giving him the most improved player for the NFC for me. What did you do here?
I went with a dude that I before this season, everybody it seemed like unanimously just thought he's a jag. Like you could literally replace him with anybody and it would probably produce the same results. And I don't know because DeAndre Swift all of a sudden became like
Mm,
a
shouldn't have you go
pretty
this way.
good running back out of nowhere. He granted, I think there's a fair argument to say that he's maybe a Ben Johnson scheme merchant, but he did
But
have
Ben
his
Johnson was the one that shipped him off. So
yes, yeah,
now they work. So that's improvement right there. He lowers his
yes,
shoulder into people now, man. That never happened
yes.
before.
He had his best year in the NFL in his
Hmm.
sixth season, which doesn't typically happen for a running back,
No.
of especially DeAndre Swift's caliber, where it's like you were never really a full time starter up until
Yeah.
like last year, maybe even like the year in Philly. I guess you could consider
Because he
in the full
wasn't taking
times.
those hits. Hmm.
And he had his highest rush success rate of his career.
Yep.
He highest yards per attempt, highest total yards. I was very impressed with him in the sense of just I thought that this guy was drafted to be like a very much in a
Hmm.
way he was kind of drafted to be like a Jameer Gibbs type of running back
Yep.
before Jameer
Hmm.
Gibbs, and it just didn't work. And then it was like Detroit said, well, chip him off, we'll just draft Jameer Gibbs, and it'll work the second time, and it did.
Yep. Hmm.
And all of a sudden, he has this like revitalization where, I mean, going into the year, I thought that it was going to be a situation where even Roshan Johnson and Kyle Monangai are going to like steal significant snaps from him,
Remember Roshan Johnson? Mm,
and he
good
just
times.
proved me wrong in many ways to the point
Yep.
where he very much like far and away was I think like the perfect kind of guy to fit for this Ben Johnson team, especially in
Yeah.
year one of the way he implemented the run scheme. So,
Yeah.
I just wanted to give kudos today. And I know that Ben Johnson was my coach of the year, but I do think that like the Bears' run game specifically was
Yes.
such a
Hmm.
strong narrative throughout the whole season before Caleb even like started taking off. Like it was just that man, the Bears are running the ball and they've been able to run the ball the whole season no matter what.
Hmm.
And it was because mostly in part to or in big due in big part to DeAndre Swift.
Other NFC shout out, Emmanuel Forbes. Like we thought that guy was out of the
Yes.
league,
Yeah.
and now I don't. The reason I didn't go with him is because I don't know if he's how much better he's actually playing because the Rams have just been covering up like subpar cornerback play. But like and every time you watch a game, he's making a play.
He
Um,
was like, no, we thought that he was going to be in the UFL. That's a big
yeah, I
one.
mean he was donezo, and he because he latched onto them at the end of last season,
Hmm.
and he walks into this year as a starter, and he plays over 70% of the defensive snaps. He's a legitimate outside starting corner for them, and they're in the NFC Championship game. So also just shout out to him for his career being saved, at least for another little
Yeah.
bit here. Let's stay on the defensive side of the ball. We got two more awards. It's time for the big one, Defensive Player of the Year. No shock, Payne. We both went with Miles Garrett.
Yeah, as boring as it is to say, because this is probably the most chalk of chalk ones that either of us have.
Yeah.
I mean, like I think this is the most impressive pass rusher season I've ever seen. Dude had, I mean, like what was it? Like he was trying to break the record for like 4 weeks, wasn't it? Or 3 weeks? It was
I
three or
mean,
four
really,
weeks.
if you tier what they were actually playing for, it was like 18 weeks, but that's fine.
Well, sure, but I guess my point being that like
Yes, I see what you're saying. He was stuck on 22 sacks for quite a while.
yeah, and I mean it was almost to the point though where I mean, and you can attest to this because it was very apparent that teams were game planning almost like to make sure that he wasn't going to break the record, and
So
especially
glad it didn't happen against the Steelers.
yeah,
I'm so glad it
especially your
didn't. I
Steelers
will
because they were
say, and I said this on the pod the week that happened, Pittsburgh didn't do anything different than they normally do to Miles Garrett, which is all their attention was on him anyways. Aaron Rodgers specifically played the game of football to not
yes,
give up the sack. So it's like the Steelers play the Browns every year to not let Miles Garrett take over the game, and that was all the same. But Aaron Rodgers specifically was playing in a way that he did not want to get sacked. So it's
Yes.
the best of both worlds for me because it didn't happen to the Steelers, but I can blame Rodgers for the way it looked.
So I mean, I don't know that there's much more to say other than just that. I mean, even more so than any, like, I mean, I we've seen some impressive seasons from not just Myles Garrett, but like, TJ Watt, like, breaking the record
Mm-hmm.
as well. Even like, in my coming up rooting for the Vikings, like Jared Allen having a 22 sack season. Like, we've seen some really elite sack seasons. But overall performance, like, this Browns defense single handedly won some games that like they had no business winning, almost because of Myles Garrett and what the defensive line was able to do. And I don't have really anything else to kind of expound on that. It was just a dominant season by him.
Awesome season. He breaks the record. There is an asterisk. But he breaks the record. And even though the Browns didn't have a good season, I don't think it's fair for offensive player or defensive player to judge based on the overall team record. Now, it certainly helps. But what I care more about typically is how that side of the ball performs. And this was still a top 10 and at times, and depending on what you look at, top five, top three defense in the NFL. I mean, they were eighth in DVOA, fourth in yards, second in first downs. Um, and Garrett, not just the sacks, but fifth in quick pressures, sixth in total pressures, fifth in stops, which is like positive EPA gain for the defense. So like runs that go for less than successful yardage or a pass play that he then gets involved in at the tackle at the back end, stuff like that. Um, awesome defensive season for the Browns, which is super impressive considering the offense, and awesome pass rush season for Myles Garrett. Even if there's an asterisk on sack record, that's fine. But great job by Garrett. Tremendous season for sure. And let's get into the big one, MVP. Um, I should do mine first, I think. Well, actually, no, you should do yours first. You should do yours first. Let's get into it. Yours is fun.
Okay, can I say that this is probably my least favorite MVP race that I've had the pleasure of discussing? A, since I've like started
Yeah, go for it.
podcasting, but B, also like in a really long time. I feel as though if there were ever a year for us to consider the non QB MVP, like in this modern era, it does feel like this is maybe a good year to do it. And yes, Stafford had a great season. Yes, Drake May had a great season. But even like going towards the end of the season, it never really felt like if you polled everybody who is like actively watching the NFL, keeping who cares about the MVP race enough to have a say, nobody was like really sold on either of those guys. Like you would ask them, like, who's the MVP? Then they would kind of give you an answer, but like they never really like felt it in their, in their with like they never really felt conviction in it, right? And that just tells me that like of all the MVP races we've had recently, like this one is just very much one of those where I think that the value proposition of like the player who was the most valuable to the team, not just like the best quarterback on the best offense, is so important for this year in particular, which is why I went Christian McCaffrey. I know that sounds crazy because, yes, it's not a quarterback, but by God, Christian McCaffrey in his whatever year he's in, like what, year nine? What year is this
Sounds
for
right.
him? Had the most touches of his career after
Hmm.
having multiple career ending injuries, stayed healthy the entire year after dealing with Achilles tendonitis last year. Not only that, but like,
Bilateral, both legs.
yes, both legs. And not only that, but the offense freaking carried this team the whole season, due in large part to Christian McCaffrey just being on the field all the time. So I don't know what to do. Like I don't know what else to do to say that like, man, this team was literally one game from being the one seed, and yes, they ended up beating the Eagles in the playoffs. So it's not like they were a bad team. Yes, they got blown out by the Seahawks, but I mean that's there's other factors there at play. Like they were down multiple players at that point. But my point with that is just without if you take Christian McCaffrey off this team, like what is this team this season? And I know you can do that with like Josh Allen, right? Like you can make the
Mhm.
Josh Allen argument. Like I wouldn't even be mad if somebody picked Josh Allen instead for the same reason. I think that's a very valid argument. But to me, given that like CMC has had what he has had happen to him prior, and then like, the fact of just how this dude is the engine. He is like the every single part of the car almost, except for like the like I guess yes, Brock Purdy did contribute and is good, but like this offense doesn't is not the same with Brian Robinson taking a lot of the carries. It's just not. Um, and I think that more importantly, I think that them beating the Eagles the way that they did in the playoffs without George Kittle and them, Christian McCaffrey still just being like the sole weapon on that team that's able to like not win them the game, but practically like be a big reason they won the game was enough for me to be like, all right, this dude just has so much value to this team for a team that won, what was it, 12 games, right?
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
That I had to give it to him. And not say it this way, but like it feels a lot of people are having the Matthew Stafford argument. Of course, Drake May, like there's the schedule, like, him being nicknamed that now because everybody just thinks that he was
That's funny.
just a schedule merchant the whole year. And I get it. And I also think, but I also think that like a lot of the people are going to give the award to Stafford, which he is the favorite. And I'm fine with that. But a lot of there is a narrative that like the reason Stafford is getting the MVP is like it's the career MVP kind of
Mhm. Mhm.
narrative.
Mhm.
If you're gonna have that argument, can we just give it to the running back who's literally like representative of maybe like the one of the last great guys at the position who just had one of the most unthinkable years in recent memory for that position, given the circumstances. Anyways, and he's gonna win comeback player of the year, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But
Mhm. I
but
was gonna mention that.
yeah, but that he's my pick.
Well, bravo to you. This is wild and insane, and
It is.
they're not on my watch. Is my response. Um, Although while you're talking, I just double checked things, and it was like, what would happen? Because I was going to be a smart aleck, right? And I was going to say, okay, do you really think it'd be that different if McCaffrey wasn't out there? It's a Shanahan offense. Well, the 49ers went 6-11 last year when McCaffrey wasn't
Yeah.
playing, and that was the year that they had Nick Bosa and Fred Warner, and Brock Purdy played 15 games. So it was really just like McCaffrey played 4 games, Trent Williams played 10, and a lot of those misses were just at the end of the year when they were already kind of out of it. So this team was literally the inverse last year. They had all those other guys, and McCaffrey was out, and they won 6 games. So okay, you got me on that one. That's pretty good. Here's the thing, and I had McCaffrey as an others considered on my offensive player of the year. So let's tie this back into offensive player of the year. If you want to factor in the running backs to the conversation, which I did because I was like, okay, the wide receivers, like they're so close. Like, is there a way I can just like not pick one, right? Bijan Robinson led the league in yards from scrimmage this year with just under 2,300. He also had 11 touchdowns. And he was probably the best offensive player I watched via eye test this season. Just like turn on the game and it's like, well, nobody in the NFL does that. But the Falcons and their offense just weren't good enough to be in this conversation. So, like what we just said about Myles Garrett. Yes, the Browns were bad, but their defense was awesome. The Falcons, even with how good Bijan was, their offense wasn't even all that good. Anyways, even some of his like advanced metrics as a runner just weren't good. So it'd really just be on raw yardage and then eye test. However, Christian McCaffrey was second in the league in yards from scrimmage with just over 2,100, so not much that much fewer. He also had 17 touchdowns and led the 49ers to another elite offensive season as a receiver and a running back. He had over 100 catches and 900 receiving yards for the first time since 2019.
Yeah.
Just 2 years ago in 2023, McCaffrey had a similar season, albeit with a better rush production. He had 1,459 yards and 14 touchdowns on the ground last or in 23, compared to 1,210 this year. And he beat out CeeDee Lamb and Tyreek Hill for Offensive Player of the Year this year. And those guys had very similar resumes to Puka and JSN right now. So like this year was very akin to 2023 for him. Um, when he won it. So I was like, why aren't we talking about him winning it? I wouldn't give him the MVP for it, but he should very much be in the Offensive Player of the Year conversation because of the way he's doing the Puka thing, where it's like he's doing everything for this team, and we've seen what this team looks like without him. So he should very much be in some version of this conversation. Uh, I like that. Yeah, he's we're gonna actually get a real comeback player of the year winner again. And it's not just gonna be some weird nerd Joe Flacco situation. Um, but my MVP is Matthew Stafford. So let me go ahead and make that case. And I wanted to do this without doing the whole like schedule thing for Drake May. And so I am really just gonna focus on Stafford and what he did. I'm sticking with Stafford, who was my midseason, near midseason MVP for several reasons. First and foremost, and the most important, the guy threw for 46 touchdowns. 46 touchdowns. That's really good.
Pretty
That's
good.
12 more than the second place finisher in Jared Goff. 12 touchdowns is the difference between Goff at 2 and Patrick Mahomes at 17. Okay. We haven't had someone throw for 45 or more touchdowns in a season since 2020. And 2021 is when the extra game was added on.
Yeah.
So we haven't had that. And in a world where quarterback scrambling is more important than ever, it's even more impressive how efficient and effective Stafford and the Rams offense were with him as purely a pocket passer. So Rams for the majority of the seasons were thought of as the best team in the league. They finished first in offensive DVOA, first in points, yards, first downs, passing yards. Stafford was second in the NFL in EPA per drop back without being a scrambler, which gets factored in, right? If you can add expected points by being a scrambler like Drake May can or Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen, that helps you. He did it without that. And he was first in PFF's big time throw percentage and second among quarterbacks with at least 200 pass attempts and sack rate. So he's not getting sacked. He's chucking the ball all over the yard, and he's leading the best offense in the NFL. This just felt like a vintage all-time quarterback season that also led the best offense in the NFL. So, yes, I talked about narrative at the beginning of the podcast. If you want to talk about like Stafford's never won one, this would be a great kind of encapsulation of his career in a vintage Matt Stafford season. That's great. More important than that, I think, this is a vintage quarterback season for an era of quarterback that we don't even have anymore. So while you're saying like, hey, C-Mac, the last of this great line of running backs, right? We'll never have another running back like this. We have another running back in Bijan Robinson. I just mentioned the stats. Yes, his offense around him wasn't as good, but like we kind of have that heir apparent. We don't have a Matt Stafford heir apparent. We thought it was going to be uh, uh, CJ Stroud a little bit as a pocket passer, maybe Jordan Love a little bit. Maybe I feel a little better about Jordan Love right now, but like Stroud being that guy purely in the pocket, but his game got better at the beginning of the season when he was scrambling a little bit. So like I don't think we're gonna have this kind of guy who doesn't scramble and throws the ball efficiently and effectively to all parts of the field the way Stafford does. So other than the Drake May stats out there, which are great stats, my one hang up and so the positive case for May, my one hang up for Stafford, even just like 24 hours ago, that almost had me waver from this pick was how the Rams sputtered toward the end of the season. Because normally, what do we always talk about in the preseason show? Okay, yeah, the quarterback on the 1 or 2 seed, as long as they're a really good offense, generally wins this award. But for the Rams to go 3-3 in their last 6 games and lose control of the division, lose control of the NFC 1 seed, was not a good look for Stafford or the Rams. Especially because history tells us MVP comes from that high seed, and MVP candidates get crossed off when they have these bad games. You and I talk about this all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want to just do that, so I wanted to dig into those games a little bit. In those 3 losses, I'd say Stafford had 1.5 awesome games and 1.5 bad games. The Panthers game was bad, right? That one loss to them, and the first half of the Falcons game really got out of hand, where there was a turnover that wasn't Stafford, but then the pick six as he's trying to make up for it as clock's time's running out in the first half, and quicksand got away from him. But the second half of the Falcons game was awesome, and a lot of those plays got called back for penalties because remember that was the DJ Humphries game at left tackle, and we had that Puka catch that ended the game that ended up not being a catch. That was almost a catch. Um, and then that Seahawks game was awesome. He had like 500 yards. That was a 1 point game against the team that ended up being the 1 seed. So I wanted to add the context of those three losses because I on a bigger sample size was doing the thing I always berate voters for doing, and that's crossing off the candidates as they have bad games. And I can explain those away a little bit, or at least add the context of like he didn't just have like one disastrous outing that sealed the deal for them. Because even that Panthers game, which you could argue was the worst one, there were several good games after that, and even these Falcons and Seahawks game after that. So with the added context, the statistical resume, again, 46 touchdowns is a lot of touchdowns. And that's actually Drake May's touchdown total. Plus, if you pick, I don't know, pick Joe Flacco or Cam Ward or Jackson Dart, whichever one you want to pick. Add that to Drake May's touchdown total, and that's what Stafford did this season. Um, I thought this was just like a vintage quarterback MVP performance for Stafford all the way through, and I didn't want to let the Patriots overall greatness or a couple of sputters or just the fact that Matt Stafford had a midseason narrative, so someone has to have the end of season narrative, right? That whole thing. I didn't want to let that get in the way of just this awesome quarterback season. So Stafford, awesome individual season for the Rams, awesome offensive season all the way around.
To be fair, I also would have picked Stafford if I knew you were or weren't going to pick him, and B, if I didn't want to do my best Ben Parker impersonation. So I definitely do. I agree. To be fair, yes. Did I pick CMC kind of as a little bit? But I also did
So
like I did want to at least like have the discussion around it because
it was a great case.
yeah, I think that if there were ever really like a season where we're gonna happen, like this is kind of the playbook. Other than I guess like I granted Stafford did still have a great season, but like this is the kind of season you need to have where all the quarterbacks that usually are gonna that you like preseason are predicting to be in this discussion kind of falter, and
Yep.
then that like this is like I think we had this discussion like will a running back ever win the
Yep.
MVP again when we had that MVP episode in the offseason. This is kind of the playbook for it, and it's not going to happen very often. Like it's
And
just
if the
not.
Rams weren't so pass heavy in the red zone, because
Yeah,
I looked this up between the Patriots and Rams, right? Because like the Patriots, like they're like a 46% pass attempts in the red zone team,
hmm
and and that's like 24th or something like that. And so if the Rams are like first, like they get in the red zone
yeah,
and they're letting Stafford chuck the ball. If he has 35 touchdowns instead, because those 14 Devontae Adams touchdowns were like 10 of them were all just like 8-yard touchdowns because
yeah,
he's such a good route runner down there. If that was a more normal number, then maybe we're having a different conversation with the
yeah.
way that the end of the year happened. But 46 touchdowns is so many touchdowns,
It's
man. It's so
overwhelming.
many.
Yeah, yeah. I agree. I agree.
I don't want this to be like, and not that I'm going against the pick last year with Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, but I remember going into the preseason award show and looking back at Lamar's numbers again, and being like, "Wait, he threw how many touchdowns and how many interceptions?" It was like what 30 and 4 or something like that.
Yes.
I was like, "Oh my God!" Like I didn't want to go with Drake May's 31 touchdowns or something, which is still great. But then look at Matt Stafford's 46 and be like, "How
Yeah.
did 46 touchdowns?" Like
Right.
sometimes we just want to throw touchdowns, man. Sometimes
Yep.
let's just let that be the
We just
thing.
want to sling the ball around the yard, right?
We just want to play in the backyard with our friends. All right, Peyton, I think that was great, man. Anything else on our award show? This ends officially our like, maybe we'll do like a supplemental playoff award show at some point. But this is our official end of the 2025 award show season, man. How you feeling?
Sad,
Oh
kind of.
man, bummer.
I know.
We do only have
I
three more NFL games this season. That is a bummer.
yeah.
I've told
I
myself a
think
few
that
times.
I think it's just it's strange to think that we're already here, but I think that's probably because the way that the playoffs have felt like doesn't really feel like we've gotten a lot of closure for like a lot of the like general I don't even want to say like parties that typically make up the NFL season, but like it just seems that because a lot of the faces that we are not used to being involved this late in the season are present, that it's almost like, wait, so we're gonna get maybe a Jarrett Stidham and Sam Darnold Super Bowl, and that's it. Like that's how
Supposed to be
this.
satisfied with that.
Yeah, it's like are we like do we what do we do with this? And so I think it's just one of those things where it doesn't really feel like this is how a
We're
season
still
could.
waiting. We're waiting for Patrick Mahomes to run out the tunnel.
Yeah. It's like I'm waiting for like the Super Bowl to be treated like the Royal Rumble, and Patrick Mahomes comes out for the Broncos at halftime,
Oh
and
man,
it's like he turns heel. So it's one of those situations where it's just it feels very strange that we're at this point in the season because of the way things have played out. So
it's every run of Batman comics where he actually like kills Joker or Joker's not in
yeah,
that universe or
right.
something like that, and Batman actually goes crazy because he doesn't know what to do without him. So NFL fans right now who for 5 years have wanted Patrick Mahomes not be in the
Right.
Super Bowl are like, ah man, I don't. Is this actually what I signed up for? Don't look get horse in the mouth, people.
Oh, I can't remember what the line is from Dark Knight where he's like, you like what does he say? Like where he's giving the whole spiel about like where he's like, you need me, and it's like we need each other
Oh,
kind of thing. I can't remember like
mm-hmm.
the exact quote, but
Yep.
that's very much how it feels. Where it's like NFL fans hate like Mahomes, and they even some of them like dislike Lamar and don't think he's like the real deal. But it's like, man, we would really love one of these guys to
It
be
it
here right
y-
now.
it's the stress of you actually want that guy in the Super Bowl so you can root against him all the way, but then he loses.
Right.
So last year was peak that
Yes,
for everybody.
correct.
That's just too stressful for me. I remember the year the Bengals went to the Super Bowl and all postseason I just had to watch them. And I think the way that year worked was that the year they beat the Ravens in the first round. Maybe
That
the
there
Ravens
was a
weren't even in
year I
there.
think they
Whatever.
beat the Bills.
Okay.
No, was it the
Whatever it
Bill?
was. We
No,
don't we don't have to do this
it's
whole thing
fine.
now.
It's fine. We don't have to
Uh
go through playoff history here, but
But
yeah,
whatever it
yes,
was, I just remember each week just being like, I just need the Bengals out so I could just enjoy the rest of it, right? And instead, I had to watch them. But then it was really satisfying to watch them lose in the Super Bowl. So that's where everybody's at. Okay, we are done here. Shout out Peyton, thanks for being here, man. Thanks for all the awards as always. This has been tremendous. Two peas on a pod. Make sure you guys are checking that. What do you got coming up on two peas on a pod over the next couple weeks, Peyton?
we have had an irregular recording schedule because of just whatever life, but we are actually recording on Thursday night, so the pod will be up Friday morning.
Heck yeah.
So which is abnormal, but it will be up before conference championship week, and then I believe we're back to our normal like Tuesday release after conference championship week. So we'll be back to a somewhat normal schedule. I know that you and I discussed this before, but given that we're leading up to draft season, I'm currently working on my big board, which I
Heck
think
yeah.
you and I are going to do something related to our big boards and like coming up with a consensus big board like we did last year. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I'll go ahead and say this: not really loving this draft class. Like I
Yeah, huge
just
bummer.
overall kind of not even the quarterbacks. That's not even the problem. I just am finding myself not super duper excited about a lot of these guys, but we gotta like some of them. So I'm working on that. Working on trying to
The
bring up.
2026 NFL draft, we gotta like some of them.
So I'm working on trying to convince myself that I like some of these guys,
Heck
but
yeah.
that will be coming up soon as well. But in the meantime, yeah, go listen to our podcast and tune in for any draft content we have coming up between myself and Simon and the other guys here.
So two peas on a pod. This is episode, what's today? Today's Wednesday. We're recording. This episode comes out Thursday, our usual schedule. So on Friday, you could check out two peas on a pod. And then next week, get after
Yeah.
the normal schedule earlier in the week. Box Score Network. Be on the lookout for that. My big board is that up yet? Maybe that goes up tomorrow. I forget what I think we put up a video on reacting to Dante Moore. Um, withdrawing from the draft, which actually was part of this podcast feed last week. So if you watch or listen to this podcast, you already got that. But my big board will be up on Box Score Network this week as well. Ben already has his 1.0 up. Payne will have his up shortly. We'll continue to add draft content to the Box Score Network YouTube channel. So make sure you guys check out the Box Score Network YouTube channel and check out all the pods on Box Score Network. In the meantime, we will be getting ready for the Super Bowl. We will be getting ready for the NFL offseason, free agency, quarterback movement. Programming note for this show, not sure. I'll have an episode next week as we move things around to get some very important annual shows in your feed as soon as possible, but getting those shows done the right way. So, annual nerdy Super Bowl preview with Ben, annual quarterback carousel, way too early predictions with Ronan, and then QB power ranking update with Josh. We're working on those over the next couple weeks. One of them might not happen next week, so we might throw something together for next week. We might wait and do two shows week of the Super Bowl. So just be on the lookout for that. If you don't see an episode next week, you will get a bonus episode in the week or two after. But that'll do it for the meantime. So thank you all so much. We will talk to you again soon. Have fun and be safe out there.